Hello, what's good, everybody? Hello, and welcome back to Against the Fence, where this is the place to be if you're obsessed and passionate about the UFC. We're going to be recapping the events from this past weekend's UFC 314, Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez. But if you're joining the channel for the very first time, make sure you hit that like button because it's free to do so, and hit the subscribe button as well because, like I said, we're a UFC fan channel where fan opinions matter most. And let's bring up some of the topics that we're going to be going through in this show. We're going to be predicting some future matchups from the winners and losers. We'll also maybe go through a couple of prelims as well that we enjoyed, some fight of the night potentials. We'll talk about the Volk revealing his return date. Even though he's literally just fought Diego Lopez, he wants to get straight back in there. So we've got some intel on that. We'll also talk about Paddy the Baddy's path to the belt and kind of go over maybe some of the things that we've gone through in previous videos when we were speaking to people outside the O2 Arena in London ahead of UFC London. So we'll kind of review that side of things as well. We'll talk about Colby Covington revealing some secrets about potential matchups for International Fight Week. Don't know if you guys have seen it on social media, but either way, we'll get into that a little bit later on in the show. We'll also talk about Dominick Reyes' rise back to title contention following his win against Nikita Krylov. So welcome on in, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and let's get on with the show. I want to, first of all, give a shout out to those guys who joined the watch along. Let's bring that back up, actually. Who joined the watch along this past weekend and got to meet Drew Dober. It was awesome to get him on the channel and sit and watch the fights with him. Sadly, we couldn't watch the main event with him, but duty calls. He had to go back to the wife and little kiddo for a spa day that they booked in at 11 o'clock in the morning the next day. But look, appreciate Drew coming on the show, and he had an absolute blast. We had the absolute blast, and you guys' questions were insane as well. So yeah, thanks for getting those over. What a cool guy, right? We got on with him pretty well. He shared some good insights with us off camera as well. We had a little drink with him before we went live. He shared some good insights into training with Justin Gaethje when COVID was happening as well. Maybe we can get him on the channel for a Q&A session down the line. So maybe you guys can perhaps ask him some questions about that, because I think that'd be really interesting. Yeah, and get your comments in the chats as well if you enjoyed seeing Drew Dober on the channel this past weekend. As much as I did, I think he was a sound guy, bro. Sound guy. Yeah, fingers crossed we can get back on. Some of the prelims following this past weekend, we got to see a few as we did prelim and main card watch along. We got to see from the Julian Rosa Darren Alkins fight. We saw Chase Hooper dominating Jim Miller. Didn't really expect it to be 30-27 on one scorecard. Chase, I think, was just a little bit slicker and a little bit faster in the grappling sequences for Jim, and Jim just kind of showed his age a little bit. I mean, he's still somebody who's difficult to stop, I think we said in the show that the last person to submit Jim Miller was Charles Oliveira back in, I think, 2018. And Chase Hooper, if he was to get the job done against Jim Miller, it was going to be via submission. But he won the decision in that one. Dan Ige looked absolutely flawless against Sean Woodson. Very surprised about that. I thought Woodson would be able to use his range a little bit better in that contest. But Dan Ige closed the distance, ripped to the body really well, and landed up top. Got the finish in round 3. Werner John Drober really shocked me against Yan Jinan. 30-27 across the board. She's the next contender now at women's strawweight. We've not got that ranking card to show later on tonight, but it's pretty clear that she's going to be the next to challenge Weili Zhang. And look, she impressed me with her takedowns. I didn't think that she was going to be able to get Yan Jinan down. When I evaluated the fight coming into this, I mean, I didn't do homework on it because it wasn't on the main card, but when I evaluated this fight, I felt that Yan Jinan had been taken down previously by wrestlers, Carla Esparza being one of them. She struggled against Weili Zhang, who's been improving in that area and has shown that levels to her game. Jandiroba, I felt her takedowns in the past been mostly from the body lock. I didn't think that Yan Jinan was going to let her take her down like that. But look, she even got her down with single legs, and it proved that Yan Jinan's takedown defense needed to be worked on a little bit there in that fight. But I'm excited to see what Jandiroba can do against Weili Zhang. Obviously, I'm going to be picking Zhang in that fight. I think it's pretty clear. She's going to be much tougher. She's going to be more physical, I think. And just an overall beast, I think. You know, you could see as Weili Zhang stoppage in that, in my opinion, perhaps on the feet. But she might be a little bit cautious on over-accelerating herself to the point where Jandiroba can get her down and threaten submissions, because that's where she's going to want to get the fight, right? At the end of the day. So, yeah. Oh, here we go. Yes, Jesus loves you. Yes, my bro, who says, Jesus died for you on the cross so you can have eternal life in heaven for free. Obey and live for Jesus. Thank you very much, good sir, for the wide words. Yes, Breezy, good to see you in the house. Smash the like button, brother. You caught most of the prelims, didn't you? And some of the main card. Or overall, what was your standout fight of the night that kind of really got you going? For me, it was the Paddy Pimblett versus Michael Chandler fight, without a doubt. Jean Silva versus Bryce Mitchell had me on edge. I kind of... I mean, the outcome surprised me. I thought that Jean Silva was going to get the knockout in that fight, but I mean, look, everyone was picking Jean Silva, and what a character this guy is, and he's going to be shining even more so now in the UFC's featherweight division. But let's get into properly recapping these events then before we get into the new segments where we talk about Colby Covington in two different occasions, and we'll talk about, of course, what's not next for Paddy Pimblett. We'll also talk about what's next for Alexander Volkanovski, Diego Lopez, lots to go through. Welcome on in. Breezy says, yeah, to be different. Jandiroba probably impressed me the most. For me, she had the most difficult opponent, respectfully, and put on a clinic title shot next. Yeah, I think it's just undeniable. She's undeniable. There's no one else, really. And Weili Zhang's pretty much fought everyone else. Unless, I mean, I know on the show we've talked about before, we felt that Zhang Weili needs to move up in weight. That could also still happen, perhaps. You know, maybe a Jandiroba fight doesn't really excite her, so we'll have to see what happens there. We'll have to see what happens. Or maybe it could be Jandiroba against a Tatiana Suarez for the vacant belt. I don't know. I think that would be my pick, actually. Because I want Weili Zhang to do what Ilia Topuria is doing, you know? Breezy says, but UFC are saying they don't want to division champs anymore. Yeah, I mean, that basically clears it up, isn't it? She'll have to vacate. And I think she should. I mean, look, two-time champ. You've defended the belt at least twice on both occasions. What else left is there for you? I felt that Tatiana Suarez was her toughest test in that division. She absolutely mollywopped her. Come on now. Come on. Come on over. But, yeah, I think it is all going to depend on the Valentina Shevchenko-Manon Fiorot fight. Really. And there'll be lots of content. That fight's going to be coming up next month. So there's going to be some predictions from fans again for that pay-per-view. So make sure you guys have got the notifications bell rang on our channel and you're staying in tune for that. Some interesting thoughts there from fans. It was good to catch up with them during UFC London Fight Week. But okay, let's finally digress and get into the first fight of the main card. Let's recap that. Dominick Reyes, in impressive fashion, stopping Nikita Krylov in the first round and moved on. Look, have we ever known a fighter fight for the belt, go on a heavy knockout losing streak and climb his way back up to the top? That's my question to you guys. Because Dominick Reyes at the moment looks like a well beater, and he could very well get himself back into title contention. Has it ever happened before? Because I can't think of a time where it has. The closest I think we got was Glover Teixeira, because he fought for the belt and then took 7 years to climb back up to the top. But he didn't go on this crazy knockout loss streak like Dominick Reyes has just gone through. So I think I can see a path back up there for him. And his performance was flawless. He stuffed takedowns from Krylov. I was expecting a relentless start from him. We kind of saw that. But Reyes' takedown defense just held up at the end of the day, and he was able to put him out with a big shot. Followed up with some ground and pound. If we head on into the rankings now for the light heavyweight division, Reyes moves up to number 8 now, just behind Khalil Roundtree Jr., who will be fighting Jamal Hill that we know, so he could move up some spots should he get the win there. Reyes, if you're going to give him an opponent next, it's got to be Alexander Rakic. It has to be. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. He last lost against Magomed Ankalaev back in October 2024. Ankalaev's now the champ. Rakic's previous losses were to Yuri Prohaska and then Jan Blachowicz, which are all top guys in that top 5 region. Rakic needs to fight a contender coming through, and that would be Dominick Reyes. You know, because for the UFC seem to reward people, right? If you're constantly finishing and knocking dudes out, submitting dudes, you're going to get big jumps in the rankings. If you're just going through decisions, like a Lerone Murphy as just a bit of an example, then you're just going to gradually build, right? So, yeah, I think Rakic is the best option. Would he rematch Jan Blachowicz? It's possible. When you look at Blachowicz' strength of schedule, I guess, in terms of people he's fought before, has he fought nearly everyone in this division? The loss against Allberg was a bit of a setback. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. Before that, he drew against Ankalaev. The Dominick Reyes win was back in 2020, so 5 years ago, and that was when Blachowicz won the vacant light heavyweight title. Oh, I forgot that was a title fight. Damn, okay. So this would be like, by the time Reyes gets himself into title contention, you're thinking, is it going to be 2026? Is it going to be 2027? Yeah, like, it could be 6-7 years from his last title fight. Yeah, pretty impressive. Yes, Captain Raf, who's in the building, says, "What's up, fellas? Raf in the building. Good stuff, Raf. Good to see you, my brother. And what did you make of Dominick Reyes' performance against Nikita Krylov? And who would you like to see him fight next? Because on my list, I've got Alexander Rakic. All-out striking affair. Reyes clearly has changed some things to his game. He seemed quite difficult to hit against Krylov. Okay, Krylov's not the best and most skillful of strikers in the division, but at the same time, like, Reyes has fought, who did he win against prior to that? Anthony Smith, okay, bit of a strong all-rounder. Dustin Jacoby win, I think, was most impressive because Jacoby is more of a striker than anyone. He got the job done by a knockout in that one. Captain Raf says, "I would love to see Volk versus Yair. You'd like to see that fight run back again? Ooh, so soon." I mean, Yair could very well get himself back into title contention. I do believe that it's possible, but I think he needs to impress people a little bit more, in my opinion. And he reckons Paddy versus Gaethje. Oh, can't wait to get into that fight. Stick around for that. I've got some big opinions on that one coming very, very soon. As for Nikita Krylov, I've got one fight option for him. I would give him Bogdan Guskarov. We last saw him at UFC 311 back in January. He was forced to fight a newcomer in that fight, and he was on short notice, but he got the submission victory anyhow. So we would like to see him probably push up into the upper echelon. Welcome on in, SDAWGS MMA Talk. ATF, what's up, Dar? What's up, brother? Good to see you in the house. Did you catch most of the fights this past weekend? What future matchups do you want to make following this UFC 314 card? And I want to hear some of your thoughts on Colby Covington's antics. We'll break down that altercation they had backstage, as well as some big-time fights that he's supposedly thrown out there that the UFC are making during International Fight Week in June. So when he was with Sneeko, I think it was. Welcome on in, Topuria Cat. DDP is going to expose Hamzat. Remember this comment. Wow, so we've got a big DDP fan in the house. Yeah, we'll talk about that because Colby may have let slip of when that fight's happening. Got some big opinions heading your way during the new segment of the show, but I'd be interested to get your thoughts on what you'd like to see next for some of these winners and losers following this past weekend's main card. Dominick Reyes, I'll recap now. I would like to see him against Alexander Rakic. For Nikita Krylov, it's got to be Bogdan Guskarov, who is Guskarov. Where's Guskarov at the moment? I haven't got the rankings up on this page. He's down in at number 13 there. 3-fight win streak. Yeah, give him a couple of jumps up. Above him, Azamat Murzakanov will be fighting Johnny Walker at the next pay-per-view. No, sorry, 2 pay-per-views time in June. And those two obviously next to each other in the rankings. Time-wise, it kind of makes sense. Krylov surely wants to get back in there because, you know, did you think that Krylov looked a little bit, you know, rusty in there? He had been out for a little bit of time. I'm not too sure of, you know, I felt that he was comfortable on the feet until he got caught, really. That's my take on it. Let's head into the second fight of the main card then, where Jean Silva, I think probably maybe most people's most confident pick of the night. I don't know, a lot of people were siding with Bryce in this, and I think it was very difficult to side with Bryce following some of the comments that he made a couple of weeks ago, or whenever it was, some time ago now. Was it after the Kron Gracie fight or before? I can't actually remember. But either way, Jean Silva getting the submission victory. That ninja choke was gnarly in round number 2. Silva, this guy, can he go all the way? I guess is a bit of a question at the moment that we're wondering now, because these fighting nerds have just been finishing guys left, right, and center, whether it be knockout or submission. Bryce in this fight had 14 takedown attempts and was only successful on 1 occasion. This was Silva's 5th stoppage win in a row, the 3rd submission win of his UFC career against a wrestler who's got some good submission games of himself. You know, Bryce is known for being one of the only twisters in the UFC. Only a select few have done that. So to get a win against submission against a guy like this was very impressive, in my opinion. And this can only mean big jumps for Silva next. But who do we want to see him fight? It's a big question. There's a lot of fights being made in this featherweight division, and timing is going to be key. We head on into the rankings then. I mean, we're going to go back to the featherweight rankings a few times in this show, because there was most of the main card was built up with featherweights, right? So as we can see here, we'll kick things off by talking about Jean Silva, who sits in there at number 11 now. Bryce Mitchell drops down. He's nowhere to be seen. They actually put Bryce Mitchell out of the rankings. I've only just noticed this when I looked for it earlier. Oh, wow. That's madness. I mean, does it make sense? Would you not have rather put Calvin Cater out? Either way, okay, it kind of ruins maybe some of my fight picks. But for Jean Silva, big jumps ahead for him then. It could either be Arnold Allen, who's coming back from injury. Maybe the timing is right. Coming off a win against Giga Chikadze. That was back in July by decision. Is the UFC going to force him to fight a Jean Silva, who's been knocking good dudes out and submitting them? Five in a row like that. It's possible. It's possible. But I'm scratching my beard. I'm like, I want to see Arnold Allen up there, but then at the same time, who else would you give him? I think maybe a fight with Brian Ortega would be wise, but then at the same time, I think that Brian Ortega versus Aaron Pico could be an option, because where's Aaron Pico going to slot in here? You know, I think a couple of Aftermath shows ago, when it was rumoured that the UFC were interested in signing Aaron Pico, I said I would like to see Pico against Dan Ige. Dan Ige in at number 14 there. Pico's still fairly young, I think. He's not fought in a little while, right? Was it last year at some point? PFL? And I'm thinking, test him against a UFC vet, but who's a little bit lower in the rankings. And my option would have been Dan Ige. But there has been rumours about a possible fight with Brian Ortega. So I'm reserving Brian Ortega for Aaron Pico. Otherwise, you'd be doing Jean Silva against Brian Ortega maybe, or Arnold Allen versus Brian Ortega, which do make sense as well. But my other option for Jean Silva would be Aljamain Sterling, who hasn't fought since December when he lost against Movsar Evelev. He should be due back by now to competition. Maybe he is targeting the summer, Las Vegas, International Fight Week, etc., etc. He's 1-1 at the moment in the division of featherweight. His only win was against Calvin Kattar. So, does the UFC decide to do that? Or, I mean, I think I may have said this before, Youssef Zalal's also in the mix there as well. He's gone down a spot because John Silver's come in. And the dude's on a 7-fight win streak. And he's also finishing competition. Apart from Calvin Kattar, he didn't finish him. But prior to that, finished Jack Shaw, John O'Aarons, Billy Quantillo. The list goes on and on. But is he getting enough hype? Probably not. Jean Silva, is he getting hype? Yes, because he's part of the Fighting Nerds. So, you know, I got to favour Jean Silva in these type of matchups. You know, give him a former champion and now Aljamain Sterling. He'd love that. Whether or not Aljo accepts that fight, that's another thing. But hey, we'll see. As for Bryce Mitchell, what would you guys actually do with Bryce Mitchell next? It's a difficult one, right? Just slipped out of the rankings. Kind of deserves to fight a guy who's not in the rankings, who's making a bit of a surge. I've got 2 names on my list. Both guys are on a 2-fight win streak. First one is Pat Sabatini, who just defeated Joanderson Brito not too long ago. He's more of a wrestler too. A wild one, very good control. So grappler versus grappler exchanges. Is it one that's going to be a boring fight on the feet? Possible, right? Is Pat Sabatini a type of guy to just go in there, guns blazing, and just kind of get the takedown anyway? I think so. And I would like to see that. You know, I've slandered the UFC, I think, in maybe the last show about booking typical grappler versus grappler fights and it being a boring stand-up war. Bo Nickel versus Paul Craig being a prime example of that. But I just think that both guys can put a bit on a pace at featherweight, and I still think it can be an interesting fight, in my opinion. The other option I have for Bryce Mitchell would be Nathaniel Wood. He's on a 2-fight win streak, but he's only talked about in the UK, really. I don't think many people are talking about Nathaniel Wood much. Last win was at UFC London last month against Morgan Charrier, and he looked impressive against Charrier. Very dangerous fighter. He could do with fighting someone with a bit more experience again, you know. His last loss came in 2023 against Muhammad Naimov, which was a fight a bit controversial. Naimov cheated several times in that, grabbing fence, grabbing shorts, eye pokes, groin shots, the lot. And I felt that Nathaniel was a bit hard done by in that fight. Prior to that, a win against Andre Fili I felt was good. They're both probably similar. Are they both similar in age, or is Fili a bit older? Fili might be a bit older, but he's been in the UFC a lot longer. I mean, he's 34. Yeah, not too far off, but yeah. So I'd give Nathaniel a Bryce Mitchell. Test his grappling, you know, test his defensive wrestling in that one, because he can do it on the feet. He can piece up Bryce on the feet. I know he can. He's a lot quicker. So you know, that'd be a good one. But Nathaniel needs a finish. He really does to start making some more noise. Smash a like on the video, guys. Welcome on in. Welcome on in. Let's start talking about the next fight. Fight number. Oh, no, wrong one. My button's gone gammy. There we go. There we go. Fight number 3 on the main card, which saw Yair Rodriguez picking up the unanimous decision victory against Patricio Pitbull. It wasn't the most exciting of fights, really, throughout the whole card, and I felt that Rodriguez probably could have done a little bit more in that one. Pitbull, of course, what was he, 37, coming on a little bit. We've seen better days from him at Bellator. Wasn't the most impressive of performances on his end. Do you think that the pressure of being in the UFC got to him a little bit? Potentially. But at the same time, I got to sympathise with him because he fought probably one of the most awkward strikers in the division for his UFC debut, you know? And I think it was a bit of a test for the UFC to see where he's at in terms of competition. Like I said, I wanted Yair to do a little bit more. Can he still make a climb in this division? Maybe. But I don't know. I guess a win against a Bellator champion is good for him in some ways. Patricio needs a bit of a step down, I think, after that. Let him settle into the UFC a bit more. I will start with Patricio first. I'd give him Dan Ige. I think they both verbally agreed on social media that they're interested in that fight. It's a good one for Ige against a veteran. Similar style to him in a lot of ways. Okay, maybe not in the grappling department. I think Pitbull edges him on that one. Striking, who he hits hardest, honestly don't know. How many knockout wins has Ige got? 7. 5 submissions. Actually, that's quite surprising. Pitbull, on the other hand, has 12. 12 knockouts and 12 submissions. That's 36, and he's had 44 fights, man. It's crazy. 44 fights as a pro. 37. Decent. But, you know, I was really rooting for Pitbull. I was. You know, I picked him to win. I was hoping it was going to win a unanimous decision. Ruffle some feathers in this featherweight division. But it wasn't to be. Right? But we're still getting contenders coming through. And I felt like this division had dried up a little bit because of Volk's success in a lot of ways. Okay, Topuria beat Volk, but like there still wasn't like too many exciting fights for Topuria. Okay, Lopez could have been one, but Yair Rodriguez could have been one for him. But like, you know, we've seen those guys lose to Volk, and it's just a little bit of a hard sell. Topuria wants to go and chase stardom and do Conor McGregor levels of things, but that's another topic for another day. As for Yair Rodriguez, it only makes sense for him to fight Diego Lopez next. Both of them had beef during the pre-fight press conference. They were talking to each other in Spanish or whatever, and I don't know what it was over. If anyone knows what the argument was, drop it in the chat, drop it in the comments, because yeah, I didn't really look into it, but it looked pretty heated. You know, even when people were squared off and done with, they were still going at it. So make that fight happen. If you're the UFC, you'd be stupid not to, and you would probably want to go back to Mexico City for another fight night and make that as the headliner. Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, look, some love in the chats, guys. Love to see it. Yeah, who do you think gets the edge in that fight then between Yair Rodriguez and Diego Lopez? Let's get back into the rankings. Lopez, few stops above. Do you know what also annoys me? Okay, before we get on to the fight Lopez Rodriguez, why on earth has the UFC decided to drop Ilia Topuria in the rankings and not remove him completely and keep Max Holloway above him? Why have they done that? What are you doing? Like, are you absolutely stupid? Are you like, who is doing these rankings? How have you let that slip? Absolute moron behavior. Like, just take him out completely. Don't have him ranked at all. I guess they're waiting for him to have that next fight at lightweight. Just put him in at number 1. Put Max in at 3. Max isn't returning to featherweight either. Take them both out. Like, come on. Let's just get on with the division here and get some more people through. Jeez. All right, okay, that's my rant a little bit over. Rodriguez versus Lopez. Who do you think is going to win that fight? I honestly might edge it to Yair Rodriguez in this. I do. You know, I think his striking is going to be a little bit awkward for Lopez. Lopez kind of needs to swarm him and bring that kind of tornado mentality that we saw against Sadiq Youssef. However, the UFC going to make it a 5-round fight in Mexico. Is he really going to do that? Another question. Is Diego Lopez built for 5-round fights? I'm not too sure. You know, we'll get more onto his performance in a second when we talk about the main event in itself. But at the moment, for Yair Rodriguez, I think it would be an excellent fight for him. It's another, I guess, former contender that he can fight. He's not really had too much success against contenders. Okay, the win against Brian Ortega, shoulder injury, meh. But then lost it later on, you know. Of course, he lost against Max Holloway, but I still believe that Max Holloway loss was a good fight for him still. I think it was one of his best performances. So, yeah, I think Yair's still got a lot to prove in this division. Like I said, Patricio Pitbull fight didn't give me too many thrills, you know. All right, cool. That's enough of that one. Let's head on to talk about the co-main event, which saw Paddy the Baddy Pimblett picking up the stoppage win, TKO, elbows, round 3 against Michael Chandler. The method shocked me. I thought it was going to go to a decision. I thought Chandler was going to gas and Paddy was just going to be too strong for him in a lot of scenarios. But look, flawless. Absolutely flawless. Chandler had him on his heels at one particular moment, or I think 2 moments in the fight, where wrestling was looking like maybe Chandler could edge things out and dominate in that area. But to be honest, Paddy was too strong for him. He got out of positions pretty well, got back to his feet, stayed composed, outstruck him, outpointed him, pushed the pace a little bit on him, and got takedowns of his own, flattened him out, full mount, ground and pound. Good night, see you later, bring me the next fight. To be honest, I think I may have had the conversation with Drew on Saturday. I felt that Paddy's frame for this lightweight is a lot bigger than most lightweights. I feel like his frame come fight night is similar to an Islam Makhachev, and for that reason, he could give Makhachev huge problems in that fight. Makhachev, as we know, Sambo style, he's going to initiate the grappling, he's going to get top control, he's going to work his way through an head and arm choke. Paddy, we know, very slick grappler off his back, pulling off triangles several occasions during his career. But could he submit Islam Makhachev? I can't see it. But will we ever see it is the next question, really. Because the 2 options I think that I would prefer. Look, I asked one guy, you've probably seen the content that we put out. I asked one guy, I listed off names of the top 5, and I wanted him to tell me if Paddy could beat them. And he only could see Paddy beating one of those people, and that was Arman Tsarukyan, who is now ranked number 1 in the division. But if you're going to give Paddy Pimblett his next fight, who could it be against? Maybe Arman Tsarukyan is a possible option. The fact that the UFC are punishing Arman for pulling out of the title fight on short notice, I think is a bit ludicrous. Because Tsarukyan is actually Islam's toughest test in that top 5. And that rematch needs to happen for stylistic reasons. But for Paddy, who would you give him? Could it be a Dustin Poirier? Well, Dustin Poirier, I think, may have rumoured or put out that there's going to be an announcement about his retirement fight in the next 2 weeks or so. So that's got to be targeted for the summer, right? So it's not going to be Paddy the Paddy Pimblett. Ruled him out. A lot of people we spoke to during the UFC London felt that Dan Hooker was a potential option for him. I like that. Actually, no. I don't like that. Because he's just going to out-grapple Hooker. It's obvious, right? I think we want to see Dan Hooker against strikers. So it can't be Dan Hooker. It's not going to be Mateusz Gamrot, I don't think. Gamrot's a really good fight for him, but he's going to smother Gamrot. He's going to be too big for Gamrot. Max Holloway? Nah. I think Poirier Holloway is the fight that the UFC are going to make. I think that's the strongest option. I would like to have seen Poirier versus Gaethje 3, but apparently I think Gaethje ruled that one out himself. So Paddy could fight Gaethje next. Gaethje coming off of that win against Rafael Fiziev, defended his ranking again, but let's face it, who else is Gaethje going to fight? Already lost against Oliveira, lost against Max Holloway, he beat Poirier, could very well fight Dan Hooker. I think people wanted that fight, right? It was it was the original fight that was booked, and then Fiziev stepped on at short notice, so maybe the UFC wanted to run that one back. Because Hooker, I think he broke his hand, right? Yeah. So we're going to need a time frame of him returning. But if you're the UFC, Gaethje versus Hooker would probably make sense. Unless they decide to do the Paddy Pimblett fight, which, like the Chandler fight, I think Gaethje's going to be ready for an all-out war again. And just could be a little bit more tougher to deal with, I think, than Chandler. Which then leaves us to another option in Charles Oliveira. Now, I think this is actually people's preferred option, Charles Oliveira, which is crazy, right? And I think it's just purely because of both guys are very skilled grapplers. You'd probably give the edge to Oliveira. He's a little bit more slicker on the ground. However, Paddy's frame and size, I think, could cause Oliveira issues. Oliveira, striking-wise, is going to get in Paddy's face the whole time. Paddy's distance movement has actually improved a lot, and that's what's impressed me the most in his last 2 fights. I feel like it's been flawless. So Oliveira needs to chase him down, use that Muay Thai skills, beat up that lead leg, and put it on Paddy in the striking area, I think. And maybe pick up a submission on himself once he's rocked him. That's how I can see that fight going. So for me, can Paddy Pimblett get himself into a title shot? My opinions, I'm not too confident. I'm sitting in with those guys that we recorded during UFC London. Most of them can't see him get into a title shot. They even said if he does, he's not beating Islam Makhachev. And that's kind of my stance on it as well. You know, I think Oliveira might be a big test for him. I would prefer to see him fight Gaethje. I think it's a more winnable fight. Gaethje is just as game as they come. He's not really bothered about losing. He just wants to put on a show and kind of prove himself in some of the shot selections that he does. That's a little insight from Drew Drober actually this past weekend. So yeah, they're the 2 options. As for Michael Chandler, he's all the way down there now, number 12. He's fallen off big time. How many wins has he had now? 2 still in the UFC. How many losses has he had? UFC is still going to keep him around. He's a company man at the end of the day. But it's a slippery slope for him now. You got to put him in there against some big names, perhaps. He might want that, but I can't see there being many options. Moicano wants to rebook against Beneil Dariush, so I'd love to see Moicano against Chandler, but it's not happening. Fiziev would be an option, a good one, I think. Because Fiziev is he's just fallen short against the likes of Gaethje. Okay, the Gamrot fight was a freakish injury. It wasn't the great. But yeah, like it's kind of tough to see where it's 3-fight losing skid in a row for Ziev, and yeah, it just seeing Fiziev against top names, big names, it's been a bit of a struggle to visualize him doing well. For Chandler, the only option really I've got for him would be the Benoit Saint-Denis versus Joel Alvarez fight, which is happening very soon. Benoit Saint-Denis has fallen short against experienced UFC caliber fighters, similar to Rafael Fiziev. Alvarez, on the other hand, has lost to rising Arman Tsarukyan at the time, but he is a little bit injury prone. So, yeah, I think either of those guys with a win after that fight deserves someone like a Michael Chandler, I think. You know, Benoit Saint-Denis Chandler is a fun scrap. Tough one to decide. I think that's the thing. Someone said it. I don't know if it was Dana White or someone said it on social media that Michael Chandler is always in. Like, it doesn't matter who he's going to get paired up with. You have no idea what's going to happen. It's going to be an all-out war, you know? Captain Raf says, I wouldn't be surprised if Islam could have fight against Oliveira again for the title. Yeah, the UFC did try to make that fight at one point, didn't they? But then Oliveira had to pull out because he got a gash over his eye, and then the UFC never rebooked it. It's going to get some hype, that fight. Charles Oliveira is a popular guy. Islam Makhachev is a popular guy. It's always going to be there. Problem with that is Oliveira's... He's coming off that win against Chandler, though, and it's just... I don't know. Do you want to see Oliveira get another win before he jumps in there? I don't know. But Arman is very skilled, and he has a great ability to grappling and striking. Could be danger against Islam. Yeah, that's my preferred option for Islam. Really. The fact that we saw Oliveira, I mean, it was a close fight against Tsarukyan, but Tsarukyan got the nod at the end of the day, and Tsarukyan's just above him in getting the title fight, really. Just is. Alright, smash that like button if you've not done so already, and let us know what you think of these potential future matchups. Michael Chandler, we're going to give him Benoit Saint-Denis against Joel Alvarez. That'll be the next option. Swiftly moving on to our main event. We're finally here before we get to some news elements of the show, where we'll talk about Colby Covington a little bit more. Well, Alexander Volkanovski picked up the unanimous decision victory against Diego Lopez. Now, I knew Volk would outpoint Lopez in this fight. I knew he'd be the quicker guy on the feet, and he didn't expect to get hit so much by Lopez, though, which was quite surprising when he said that in his the post-fight videos that he's been in. And he gave credit to him after the fight, which was pretty impressive. Does that say that, you know, Diego Lopez can grow from this performance? I think he can. Did he fight better than a lot of people thought? Maybe perhaps he did. But in post-fight, Volk did share a little bit of information. He said that he wants a quick turnaround and would like to fight 2 more times this year. However, he did say he'd like to return either July or September, but may have broken his hand. So he said he'd like to fight twice, but most likely could be once, depending on the extent of the injury, of course. I don't see Volk back in there. I think the fact that he's an absolute stud, and as soon as he fights, he names the month he wants to return and get back in there. I think it's got to give him credit for it and for him. And this win against Lopez is going to do his confidence is now sky high. It's back to where it was, right? Before he lost to Islam and Topuria. And he's still chasing the Topuria rematch, I think. But would it happen at featherweight is the question. I think it's possible, but only if Topuria moves up into lightweight and falls short in a title fight against Islam Makhachev. Because if that's the case, like, if you're falling short, what, like, you made the jump, It didn't work out for you. Similar to what Volkanovski did, you might as well go back down to 145. So, and then if that's the case, then you rematch Volkanovski, but this time Volkanovski's got the belt again. So, yeah, I think the fight's still going to be there. It's still going to draw people's eyes to it. So, yeah, Topuria's got options. You know, he's at the end of the day, he's shooting for the stars and hoping to land on one, you know. But what is next for Alex Volkanovski then? Should he return in either July or September? It's got to be Movsar Evloev, right? He's the rightful number one contender. There isn't really anyone else that's shocking anyone, really, in this division. Okay, Lerone Murphy's making waves. He's making a climb there with an 8-fight win streak, in at number 8 here. Go back to the rankings. He called out Volk via Twitter. However, does a decision win against Josh Emmett warrant a title fight? A lot of people at the moment would say no to that question. However, spin it on its head. It happened to Topuria. Topuria got a title fight against Volk when he beat Emmett and took Emmett to a decision. However, flip side again, Emmett, I think, was much higher up in the rankings at the time. And Volk had beaten everyone else in the division. So, if you're the UFC, can you sidestep Movsar Evloev again and choose Lerone Murphy? Not sure about that. Maybe. Probably not, actually. I think they've found themselves in a similar situation to Makhachev and Ankalaev. Really, they had no choice but to make Pereira versus Ankalaev in the end. And they made it. And they'll do exactly the same to Movsar Evloev. And Evloev is a tough competitor for Volk next. You know, very intriguing fight, I think. Evloev wins that, then look, is he going to become a big star? People are going to take more notice to him. He's going to be more entertaining in the public eye. We're going to see him more often on social media. A lot of questions, really. Ankalaev, on the other hand, I mean, look, I don't follow him on socials, but do you see anything trending from him since winning the belt against Pereira? Not really. Movsar Evloev is just a similar character, I think, a similar personality trait. But yeah. As for Diego Lopez's performance, why didn't Diego Lopez attempt to take the fight where he'd have the advantage, which is on the ground? That's kind of like the one thing that I've, after reevaluating this past weekend and go, why didn't he? 0 takedowns were attempted against Volk. Now, was he hoping that Volk's chin was going to be a bit suspect coming into this fight? I think a lot of people did. When talking to people at UFC London, people were saying, no, it's going to be Lopez. Volk's done. Look, once you hit your peak, you hit your peak. That's it. You go on a downward trajectory from there. The 2 back-to-back knockout losses. But Volk proved that he still got it. Distance management was on point. Movement was on point. Okay, he stumbled back at one particular period, but he was able to regroup, recover, and stay composed in champion that he is. So, yeah. But as I said earlier, Diego Lopez, Yair Rodriguez has got to happen next. And I favour Rodriguez in that. I do. Sorry, folks. Sorry. Okay. Moving on then. Let's head on to some news points then. Let's clear that. That's old. First up on the agenda is Colby Covington going off on Paddy Pimblett. That whole altercation. He was also just making fun at Paddy, saying the combined losing streak of Paddy's last 3 opponents, it's 13 straight losses. But at the same time, Colby, when was your last win against the ranked guy? I saw an interesting tweet from someone earlier. Apparently, Khabib Nurmagomedov, even though he's been retired for however many years, still has a win against a top-ranked opponent, a top-ranked fighter. Colby Covington hasn't. But Colby is being Colby here, guys. I just ignore it almost. You know, he's trying to pick fun at Paddy. He was kind of saying, and then he did this video here afterwards, basically saying that Paddy was using his name for leverage and all this, and it's like, mate, you're doing exactly that. Because you came at Paddy. I don't know what for, what reason, what happened prior. I think maybe Paddy slagged him off in an interview or something when somebody asked him about Colby Covington. That would be my guess as to what's happened. And then Colby goes off on him because people have got the cameras out. Colby's doing whatever he can to stay relevant, not Paddy using Colby's name to stay relevant. It's just not. Paddy's on an upward trajectory. Colby's on a downward trajectory. But what is the point in this altercation? It makes no sense. It's not like the two of them are going to potentially fight down the line. Unless Colby is thinking about dropping down to lightweight. In which case, fair play to him. I can't see it happening, though. So, Colby, what is your next fight? What are you going to do? Because you just got murked by Joaquin Buckley. Don't have a win against the current welterweight. You slip down to rank number 9. Who are you going to fight? Jeff Neal? Probably most winnable fight. Stephen won by Thompson, who's 40 years old. I think he's called out Gilbert Burns as well. He's pushing on a little bit now. Who you want? Vicente Luque? Alright, let's see it. But still, it just comes to show how far you're slipping, bro. I don't know. Colby's being Colby at the end of the day. But we got to move on and stick to Colby, unfortunately. Because he was seen with this streamer, which most people might know. Is it Sneeko? No, Neon. One of them. Basically, he said, I can't get the audio for you guys, which kind of sucks. But you could probably find it on social media. He basically said to him that he thinks that Islam Makhachev versus Ilia Topuria and Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev happening in the same card during International Fight Week. Look, I think he's just trying to stir the pot. He's trying to keep his name relevant at the end of the day. Another prime example of this is Colby Covington basically said to Neon that apparently Megan Fox is in his DMs, and she said that he's his favourite fighter. Her favourite fighter. But I'm calling BS on this. Colby Covington reminds me of like the typical guy at school who's just always a bullshitter. Like he'd make things up all the time. Like like the kid who was like, oh yeah, I played the new Call of Duty last week, and you'd be like, but it's not even out yet. And then he'd be like, yeah, but they hit me up and they said like, because you're such an amazing gamer and you're so good at the game, we thought would give you early access, you know. And look, that's what they did. They hit me up and I played the new Call of Duty. Or like, yeah, you know, I benched 100 kilograms in the gym the other day, and it's like or 150 kilograms or whatever, the gym. Like, all right, yeah, cool, yeah, all right, mate, sure. Yeah, my dad has a sniper rifle. He's a sniper in the Marines. All right, yeah, cool. He's literally that type of guy. He is. But look, he's just trying to get relevant, I guess. Nothing else here on Colby Covington come out this past weekend. Yeah, I just can't see what baffles me is I think he's just run with whatever this Ruben Carter guy on Twitter has been saying. Like, why would the UFC put Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev as the co-main event? It doesn't make sense. It's a bigger weight class. Or is it because they don't trust Khamzat Chimaev headlining an event, which is possible. Which is possible. But surely if you're the UFC, you do a backup. Make it as a headliner and you bring in a backup fighter. If Dricus is okay with it. Surely Dricus is game as they come for that. You know? If they were to do that, then who would be the backup fighter? Ooh, would it have to be Nasidinomov, maybe? Nasidinomov apparently recently ducked Carl Bahalio. I'd like to actually see Carl Bahalio be the backup fighter, but hey, yo. Raf says, yep, I just saw that for the record. Paddy Pimblett and Colby Covington are well known as trash talkers. Maybe Dana White could bring that fight. To be honest, yeah. No, I don't think Paddy's gonna be interested in it. As I said, Colby's on a downward trajectory. Paddy's on an upward trajectory. Paddy wants to keep going up. There's no reason why he should fight Colby Covington. There's nothing for him. I didn't really want to see it. I'd rather see Paddy fight top contenders in the lightweight division. Colby just runs his mouth at the end of the day and tries to get himself into these situations, these awesome fights. But yeah, I just don't see Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat being co-main. I'd be shocked if they make that. It's not happening, in my opinion. All right, I think I've got everything. I think I've gone through everything. That's all of the news that I got, to be honest, today, guys. Not much worthy of talking about, I thought. But as I wrap this show up now, because I'm going to have to hit the hay. Awesome stuff with the guys in the chats. You guys were great. Smash a like on the video if you've not done so already. Hit the notifications bell on the channel as well. We'll have lots more content coming your way. Yes, there is no UFC event this weekend coming. Probably because it's WrestleMania weekend. So that's my guess. Anyway, but yeah, stay tuned. Make sure you guys are checking everything out. Smash a like and put in comments down below as well. It's good to hear from you guys because you guys drive the channel. Your opinions matter most, as we like to say. So let's hear them. Let's hear them at the end of the day. All right, I'm JK. Peace out, guys. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.